welcome back to this new training session. In this new training session, we are going to talk about the app cache that is provided by the Launchpad. So let's get started. Let's jump into a Launchpad and have a look on some of the features that are available on the app cache. To have a quick look, let's just type app cache on the console and see the output. As we can see, we have an object containing a lot of information. So on the current config, we have the Launchpad name. On the current name, we have the username. On the current user, we have the long name. On the URL, we can see the domain. On the build version, we have the current Neptune version being used, and this is just a small part of the information available on the app cache. Another features that are provided by the app cache are some functions. In this case, we have also a back function there. Let's open one application and type app cache back and see what happens. As soon as we execute the function, the app navigates back to the Launchpad. Now let's open one application and then another and do the same to see what happens. As we can see, the app cache back navigates back to the previous page. So this function can be used to navigate from one app to another or to the Launchpad depending on the action that was performed previously. Another feature that is very helpful for the developers is the app cache view. In there we can see all the applications that are open. As you can see, we have two entries on the array, one for one application and the other one for the create application. Another feature that is very important is the app cache load. When we are dealing with a scenario where we have multiple applications that work offline and we need to sync data for those applications, and we don't want the user to go one by one opening and syncing, this is exactly the type of function that we need. So let's start by simulating on the browser that we are without internet, and let's try to open the field worker application. And as you can see, we have a dialog saying that the tile could not be loaded. This is because this application was not yet open and the view was not loaded. This is also something that we can do with the app cache load in order to guarantee that the user have all the data and all the application that he needs to perform the tasks. As you can see on the view and edit equipment, we have the information even offline. Let's refresh the browser, disable the internet again, and open the application. And in this case, we don't have data, so this is something that we need to address also. Let's jump into the designer, create a new application, and start playing with the app cache load to see all the features. In this application, we are going to need a script file. In there, we need to put the event on init, and inside it, let's load the code snippet for the app cache load. As you can see, we have multiple options. On the first one, we only need to pass the application name. On the second one, we have all the information on how to open one application inside a dialog. On the third one, we have the load option. So we can say if you only want to download or if you want to init also the application. And on the last one that is visible on the screen is the one where we can open one application inside a parent object, like a panel, for instance. Let's start with the first one. We just need to grab the name of the application that we want to open. Let's do that on the launchpad. Now let's comment all the options that we don't need for now. To run this application, we need to create a tile. Let's jump into the cockpit and create the tile for the application. Now that the tile was created, we need to assign the tile to the tile group. Let's refresh the browser and execute the application. Okay, we can see that we have a toast with an error. Let's see on the console. Resource is not defined. Okay, so we need to also include a shell and an app on the application. Let's jump into the designer and perform the changes. Let's try once more. Open the sync, and now we have the application being loaded. Now let's use the second option and open the same application but inside a dialog. Let's refresh the browser and open the sync app once more. And voila, the application is open inside a dialog. Now let's go on exploring the features of the app cache load. As we can see here, we have a parameter called start parameters. This means that we can pass information to the application that it's being loaded. So let's go into the create application, and because we don't have an init event on it, let's create one and put there some console logs to log the data that we are passing. Let's jump into the launchpad and refresh and execute the app again. Okay, we have one error. We misspelled the word console, so let's fix it. Activate the app and refresh the launchpad and execute the app. Now we can see that the console logs are being printed. So let's jump into the sync app and add some start parameters. Let's activate, jump to the launchpad, refresh it, and run the sync app. And as we can see now, the console logs are also printing the start parameter. For our scenario, we are going to create a cockpit that is going to display the status of the information being loaded. Okay, for now we are going to need a page, an icon, a text field. Let's type loading, and also a busy indicator. Let's activate the application and see the result. Okay, we are missing the icon, so we need to define one icon and a color. Let's put the color to green. Let's choose the icon accept. Let's activate the application and the icon is black. Let's check the color name. Okay, it's lowercase, needs to be lowercase, so let's correct that. Let's activate. Okay, so now we should include a space on the beginning and on the end of the loading to improve the design. We want to show the icon only after the update of the data is complete. So let's change the visibility to false. Now we need to create a callback function. In there, we are going to control the visibility of the icons, meaning that the icon is going to appear when the data is fully loaded. Now, to finalize, we need to go into the Create app and put there the call to the callback function. For the purpose of this training, I'm going to include a timeout. Otherwise, the busy indicator will not appear and immediately the icon is going to appear. This is just to create a small delay. Let's jump into the Launchpad and execute the sync. Let's close the dialog, and as you can see, now the busy disappears and the icon is visible. Let's change the application in order to don't show the dialog. So let's comment the options for the dialog and let's copy the load option. In this case, we want to use the load on init. This means that the init of the application is going to be triggered, but nothing else is going to be displayed. So the application will not be rendered. Only the init is going to be executed. Let's activate the application and switch to the Launchpad. Let's run the application. Okay, so we can see that the busy it's not switching to the icon. Okay, let's look into the console logs. So we see that the init was executed, but the before rendering wasn't. In our case, we have the callback function being triggered inside the before rendering, so we need to switch these to the init. Let's do that. Let's try once more. And now, as we can see, the busy indicator disappears and the icon appears. Let's improve the design of the application. We are going to use a simple form in order to align all the components. We want to also include additional applications that are going to be loaded. Let's also change the text to creation loading. Let's duplicate the code for the app cache loading, and this time we want to open the view and edit equipment app. Let's grab the name. Now let's prepare also the application. So we need to go inside the view and edit equipment app and change the init. In this case, we want to trigger the visibility change only after the data is fully loaded. So we want to trigger the callback function inside the Ajax return. In order to do that, we need to save the callback function. So let's create a global variable, and inside the attach we only need to assign the callback function from the data to this variable. Then this variable can be used inside the Ajax success return. Now let's go back to the sync app and let's create the visual part. So we need to drag a label. Let's change the text to view equipment loading, and let's copy the hbox and pass it again. We need to change the names in order to not have duplicated names. Let's change the components names in the JavaScript. And let's jump back into the view because we didn't pass the callback function into the Ajax. Let's do that. Let's try out now the application. Let's refresh and execute the sync. We only have one entry. Let's check if we activated the app. Okay, so as we can see, we didn't activate the app. Let's activate it and try once more. Now we can see that we have both entries and both of them are switching to the icon after the data is fully loaded. Let's disable the internet in order to simulate the worker without internet. Let's jump into the view and edit equipment to see the data. Okay, as we can see, we don't have any data being displayed. Let's jump into the application to analyze the cause of this. Let's navigate until the lists. And this is caused because we don't have the cache set. So let's enable cache. Let's set the cache type to IndexedDB, and also let's set the initial load to online on empty cache. Let's activate and run the sync app once more. Now, if we disable again the internet and we navigate to the app, we can see that we have access to the data. If we select one of the entries, we also can navigate to the details. Now let's prepare the things for the field worker app. As you can see, we still didn't download the view. Let's jump into the sync app and duplicate the app cache load code. We need to grab the name of the app. Let's jump into the tile and grab it from there. Let's change the load to download instead of init to see the difference. Let's also prepare the visual part of the application, so we need to duplicate the hbox and we also need to duplicate the label. We need to rename all the components so we don't have duplicated ones. And let's change the text on the label to field worker loading. Let's adjust the JavaScript components. For now, let's change the visibility after the app cache load. Let's refresh the browser. Let's enable the offline mode and click on the field worker to check the content of the dialog. As you can see, it says that we don't have a connection. Let's disable the offline mode again. and run the sync app. Now let's enable the offline mode again, and once more press the field worker app. As we can see, the error has changed. This is because now we already have the view loaded, but we didn't run the init. And we need to run the init to load the external libraries that this application uses. Let's switch to init instead of download, and let's adapt the application to call the callback function on the init. Let's also change the cache parameters. Let's enable the cache and the type to IndexedDB. Let's keep the init on online as it is right now. Let's adjust the code to perform the callback function. Let's activate the application and execute this sync app again. Okay, it seems that we have a problem. The busy indicator is not switching to the icon. Let's look into the application to see if we are able to find the issue. Let's put a debugger to see if the code is being called. And no, it doesn't stop on the debugger. So let's have a look once more. Let's change the starting point. Instead of using this attach init, let's switch to another one that we have also on this application. Let's try once more, and it seems that we have the same issue. Let's look into the console, and I'm seeing the problem. I have created this launchpad for this test, and I didn't include the libraries on the launchpad header. So let's go into the application, copy the libraries from the application header into the launchpad header. Let's refresh the browser and execute the app once more. And now it's working properly. Let's enable the offline mode once more and see if we have data on the application. Let's launch the fieldwork app, and we have a JavaScript error. So the callback function is causing a JavaScript error because right now we don't have the function on this context. So we need to do a validation to prevent this from happening. Let's jump into the designer and adjust the code. Before calling the callback function, let's perform a validation to see if the function exists. Let's refresh the browser and see if everything is working fine. Once more, we need to enable the offline mode, and let's open the field worker. Now the validation prevents the function from being called, but we don't have any data. Let's jump into the application and check the reason. So we have the Ajax, everything is properly configured. So let's check how the list is configured. If you remember, when we did the cache configurations, we keep the initial load on init. So this means that the application will try to load the data during the init. Because we don't have access to the internet, nothing is going to be loaded. So let's change to online on empty cache. Like this, the application is going to try to fetch the data from the cache. Let's refresh the browser and check if everything is working fine. Let's enable the offline mode once more. And as we can see, now we have the data. If we press in one of the lines, we can see the details. We can see that the map is not loaded. That's because we need internet access to perform that. And this brings us to the conclusion on how to work with the app cache. Now let's improve the user experience. The way that we have set up this application requires the user to open the application to load the data. Let's perform a different configuration in order to automatically load the data without requiring the user to open the application, and also give them the visibility that the information was loaded. So how can we achieve this? This can be achieved by running one application inside a tile. This means that as soon as the user opens the Launchpad, that tile is triggered. Let's jump into the cockpit and change the tile configuration. Let's set up the configuration to run the app inside the tile. Let's save it. Let's refresh the browser and see the outcome. As you can see, nothing is being displayed. And the reason for that is because the apps that run inside the tiles should start with a panel. And in our case, we have shell and then an app and then a page. So let's perform some changes and try once more. Now that we have included a panel, let's activate. Let's jump into the Launchpad and refresh the browser. And voila, we have one tile showing the information was properly updated. From the user experience point of view, this type of setup is much more pleasing. It doesn't require any interaction from the user and it's prone to less errors. And with this, we conclude this training session. I'm looking forward to see you on the next one.